How Singapore survived the sudden withdrawal of British military. In 1965, Singapore was thrust into independence and abruptly severed from Malaysia. Without the British military's protective umbrella, the island nation faced a daunting landscape: hostile neighbors, uncertain allies, and the looming threat of abandonment by its former colonial power, Britain. Yet, defying the odds, Singapore transformed its vulnerability into a remarkable story of resilience and determination. Join us on a thrilling journey to discover how this small nation forged its own path to military self-reliance, overcoming treacherous geopolitics and emerging stronger than ever. The British Exodus, a turning point in Singapore's history. In 1966, the winds of change swept across the globe, threatening to upend the status quo. As Rhodesia had declared its independence from Britain, an emergency Commonwealth Prime Ministers' Conference was hastily convened in Lagos, Nigeria, in January 1966. Lee Kuan Yew, ever the vigilant leader, seized the opportunity to sound the alarm about Singapore's precarious security situation. His meeting with British Prime Minister Harold Wilson revealed a startling truth. The British government was contemplating a drastic troop reduction from 50,000 to 25,000 in the Malaysia-Singapore area by 1968. As Lee delved deeper, in April, he discovered a web of influential voices from both British political parties, leading writers to lobby groups, advocating for a complete withdrawal from east of the Suez. The clock was ticking, and Singapore's future hung in the balance. In a high-stakes meeting, British Defence Secretary Denis Healey revealed to Lee Kuan Yew that a majority of the British cabinet, except for Prime Minister Wilson, Foreign Minister Michael Stewart, and himself, favoured a phased withdrawal of British forces from the region within 5 years. However, this powerful trio was determined to maintain a strong British military presence east of the Suez. Stewart warned that the government's policy might shift, citing strong opposition from within the Labour Party, who saw British forces as instruments of regional squabbles rather than peacekeepers. This uncertainty hung over Singapore like a dark cloud, prompting Keng Swee and Lee Kuan Yew to secretly agree. They must quickly build a robust defense capability or risk appearing vulnerable to their neighbors and people. As the sun set on Lee Kuan Yew's historic April 1966 visit, he shared a candid concern with Harold Wilson. The British base, a lifeline for Singapore, contributed a staggering 20% to the nation's economy. But for Lee, the real worry wasn't financial stability. It was the fragile morale of the people he had spent years convincing that communism wasn't the inevitable future. The withdrawal of British troops could be a devastating blow, leading to resignation and the ominous specter of China's influence. Amidst the backdrop of a strained relationship, foreign aid to Malaysia plummeted during this tumultuous period, sparking widespread speculation. Many Malaysians pointed to the Hate Britain Month as the catalyst, a spirited response to the British media's scathing criticism of their racial and linguistic policies. The meetings with Wilson and Healey's subsequent visit in July 1966 only reinforced the harsh reality. Britain's declining influence and shifting priorities would leave Singapore and Malaysia to fend for themselves in a tumultuous region. In October 1966, Denis Healey's reassuring words to Lee Kuan Yew and Keng Swee in London were a beacon of hope for the young nation of Singapore, as the British Royal Air Force, RAF, committed to staying on and watching over its tiny, fledgling friend. But in April 1967, Healey's return visit brought a starkly different message. Britain would withdraw from mainland Asia by the late 1970s, citing economic, not military reasons. As uncertainty loomed, British military commanders, led by Sir Michael Carver, remained optimistic. But on Sunday, the 18th of November, 1967, disaster struck. Chancellor of the Exchequer Callaghan's message to Keng Swee announced the devaluation of the pound sterling from US dollars 2.8 to US dollars 2.4, wiping out 14.3% of Singapore's London-held reserves. A staggering 157 million Singapore dollar loss That same day, Prime Minister Wilson's televised broadcast declared, "We are now on our own. It means Britain first," leaving Singapore reeling. Behind the scenes of pursuing global national interests. In 1967, a high-stakes diplomatic dance unfolded as Harold Holt, Prime Minister of Australia, and Keith Holyoake, Prime Minister of New Zealand, sent urgent cables to Singapore, warning of a potentially devastating blow to the region's security. They cautioned that Britain's drastic reduction of forces would dismantle the Commonwealth's defense framework, leaving a power vacuum. In a tense meeting in Washington, President Lyndon Johnson urged British Prime Minister Harold Wilson to reconsider, emphasizing that America couldn't replace British forces in the Arabian Gulf and Singapore while fighting the Vietnam War. Johnson dangled a tantalizing offer: U.S. support to prop up the struggling British pound in exchange for maintaining a military presence in Asia. As tensions simmered in Southeast Asia, Australia navigated a delicate dance with its Asian neighbors. The Aussies worried that a new military alliance with Singapore and Malaysia might be perceived as a threat by the Indonesians. Paul Hasluck, Australia's External Affairs Minister, assured Singapore that they would pull out their forces by the end of 1971, in sync with the British withdrawal. Meanwhile, Malaysian leader Razak was hell-bent on hammering out a bilateral deal with Australia, snubbing Singapore in the process. But on a fateful December 1967 flight to Melbourne for Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt's memorial service, Razak's icy demeanour towards Lee Kuan Yew began to thaw, thanks to the intervention of Australian Deputy Prime Minister McEwen. The stage was set for a dramatic improvement in Singapore-Malaysia defence relations. Amidst the smouldering ashes of Kuala Lumpur's 1969 race riots, Razak embarked on a high-stakes mission to Canberra, where a pivotal meeting of prime ministers would decide the fate of post-Britain Asian defence. As the British prepared to abandon their posts, Australia fretted over being left to shoulder the burden of protecting Malaysia and Singapore from the spectre of future racial unrest in Malaysia. Singapore's maneuver to strengthen their military. In the midst of uncertainty, Lee Kuan Yew's steadfast gaze was fixed on Singapore's security, knowing that without it, economic prosperity would be short-lived. When a British official mentioned that abandoned airfields in Malta were repurposed for agriculture or light industry, Lee Kuan Yew's determination was ignited. He urged the Singapore Economic Development Board to swiftly engage on the 3 British airfields, Tengah, Seletar, and Changi, and unlock their potential. Shifting British military regulations, Healey worked tirelessly to hand over surplus equipment to Singapore, aiding their military transition. Notably, Singapore's per capita reserve outshone Britain's, as stated by Roy Jenkins, the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. Lee Kuan Yew's vision for a fortified Singapore was taking shape. In a masterclass of diplomacy, Lee Kuan Yew personally charmed British officials and opposition leaders, hosting and visiting them to discuss Singapore and Asia's security. As the star guest speaker at Wilson's Eve of Conference rally, he captivated a large British audience. Backbenchers in the British Parliament were also treated to a lengthy address, giving Lee a unique insight into British interests. This understanding allowed him to build bridges with the British political class from both parties, securing their support and appreciation for Singapore's interests. During his 5-day London visit in January 1968, Lee passionately made the case for a prolonged British presence in Singapore, showcasing his remarkable ability to balance reason with tact. By avoiding confrontation and embracing goodwill, Lee successfully navigated the withdrawal, a stark contrast to the French fiasco in Guinea, West Africa, in the 1960s. In a bold move to restore confidence, Lee Kuan Yew stunned Wilson by proposing a massive arms expenditure to make Singapore's defense credible. The deal was sealed with Healey's agreement to purchase a squadron of Hawker Hunters, marking the birth of an air force from scratch. By end of 1971, Singapore would boast a fully operational squadron of fighter aircraft, a feat that would send shockwaves through the region. As the British withdrawal loomed, the Anglo-Malayan Defence Arrangement, AMDA, crumbled. But Lee Kuan Yew's prior collaboration paid off, and the new conservative British government in July 1970, led by Edward Heath, agreed to retain some forces in Singapore on an equal basis with the Australians and New Zealanders. The Five-Power Defence Arrangement, FPDA, was forged, with Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, and Britain coming together on consultative basis to fortify the region's defences. Meanwhile, a secretive partnership with a team of Israeli military experts, led by Colonel Jack Elazari, had been underway since November 1965, setting the stage for a historic transformation of Singapore's military might. On 1 September 1971, Singapore took a bold step towards military independence by launching its integrated air defense system, proudly shouldering the responsibility of defending its skies without Britain and without Malaysian hinterland. Thank you for watching. Please like and share this video. Kindly subscribe for more intriguing videos and stay tuned for more thrilling stories with lessons. Lessons untold. Relax, review, reflect,